Billy Paul Hansen and Annie Ruth Hansen. And I just wanted to ask you, how did y'all come to be associated with First United Methodist Church in Pittsburg?
Let me tell mine. My father was a Baptist and my mother was a Methodist. And Mama was the one that brought us to Sunday school and church. Is the reason that I'm a Methodist.
Uh-huh.
Because my father was what he called what did they call him? Anyway, firm Baptist. But he never did take us to church like my mother, and that's the reason.
Okay. Did your mother grow up in First Methodist too?
She grew up in the First Methodist.
Okay. And what was her name?
Mary Eugenia Reardon.
Okay.
And my father was Oscar L. Hansen.
Okay. And how about your family, Annie Ruth? How did your family come to First United Methodist Church?
My daddy and my mother were a member of the First Church. And I had a sister 2 months old, and we were having a revival, and Mama stayed home with the baby. Daddy and I went to church by ourselves. And after church was over that Sunday, our Bible says April the 13th.
Uh-huh.
But the church says that I was a member, became a member on April the 18th, 1923. Well, we were having a revival and we had gone outside. Church was over, morning service, Sunday morning service. And I said, Daddy, could we go back in the church and let me join the church? And he says, well, you can do that tonight. I said, we might not get to come tonight. So we went back in the church. And my Aunt Ruby Sewell and Miss Susie Quinn were standing there talking to the preacher. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he said, good, we've got 2 witnesses here, we'll just do it right now. So that may be the reason that the church has the 18th.
Uh-huh.
And my Bible has the 17th, because whoever took the records for that Sunday morning, there might not be anybody joined Sunday night, and then we had done that. And then the preacher probably told about me joining. That may be the reason the church has the 18th instead of the 17th.
Right. How old were you then?
4.
4? And you still remember it clearly?
Oh, of course I do.
Do you remember who was preaching the revival? Or who the pastor was?
I don't remember who was doing the revival unless our preacher was doing it.
Okay.
With Brother Cross.
Yeah, either Cross or Campbell. I'm going to look and see for sure about that.
How old were y'all when y'all started going to Sunday school there?
I went to Sunday school there all my life.
Well, I never did go a lot. Because after I grew up and went in the service, and I spent 5 years in California, but I do remember that I joined me and my brother Robert. They were having a revival over at Shepherd, which is used to be a small Baptist church out there. And Robert and I joined the church that night, and Mama brought my letter down the next week and put it in. But actually I joined at a revival.
Okay. What were the worship services like in those days compared to how they are now?
Well, I remember that at revivals and things, the women, if you was a kid and didn't belong with something, a bunch of women would get around you and talk you in to join in.
Mm-hmm. How about Sunday school? What was Sunday school like when you were growing up in the church?
No difference from what it is now.
Where did your class meet?
Our class started upstairs, and when we were in the primary department, and when we were promoted downstairs, we had that room when you go into the from the front door and go into the fellowship hall. It's just a pass through.
Okay.
Class, that's what our class had. And then we gave that up for a larger class and moved over almost on the west side of that building. And stayed there for a while.
Uh-huh.
Well, when I started out, I went to the men's class, the one that I'm going to now, Good Citizens. And we met in bottom of the church there, the basement. And there was 50 men in our class. And then when we built the fellowship hall, we moved over there, and it was in there until we moved it a couple of years ago.
Okay.
We were
To
both
the
members of the same church for 11 years before we met.
Okay. How did y'all come to meet?
I always wanted a big brother. My big brother was born there. And the fellow that lived across the street over here said, I told him, I said, I sure wish I had a big brother like you. He said, I'll be your big brother. Anytime you want to do anything, you let me know. So we did that. And one night he called and he said, you have any plans tonight? I said, no. I'll be there in a few minutes. Let's go to the fair. I said, okay. And that's the night that I met Billy Paul. And I was sitting in Norvell's car, and Billy Paul and a friend of his, and a friend of mine, and her friend were walking along and saw me sitting in that car. So she came up here and he said, come go with us. I said, okay, let me go tell Norvell. So I went to tell Norvell that I was going with them. That was our first day.
And that was at the fair?
That was at the fair.
Where was the fair?
It's the Northeast Texas Fair. I don't know whether you've been told this or not, but at one time, Pittsburg had the second largest fair in the state of Texas.
Never heard that.
And the reason for that was the state fairs for Texas and Louisiana. The Texas fair was held in Dallas for 2 weeks, and then they'd take 2 weeks off and they would go to Shreveport, the carnivals and all that stuff. And Pittsburg is about halfway in between, so they picked Pittsburg to stop and rest for that 2 weeks, and so they just had the big Northeast Texas Fairgrounds over there, and they started. We would have all the carnivals and things that they had at the state fair.
And
For that reason.
Mount Pleasant just couldn't understand how in the world we could have a big fair and they couldn't do it.
So there was rivalry between the two communities?
Yeah, they wanted it though. But then the train was traveling on the east and west line, and so they didn't go through Mount Pleasant. They come through Pittsburg. And that's the reason that we had the second largest they tried to get it back when the war was over. It stopped during the Depression in the 30s and 40s. And then they tried to revive it after the war was over, but